But my worthy master, taking him by the hand, said, "Rise, no more your penance. Your worth and sagacity entitles you to her. Her virtue, industry, and integrity will reward all your labor of 7 years' suspense. She will leave a specimen of her care in my family. Her mistress has surprised me with the order and management, having a robust constitution, good morals, and an industrious disposition. We being ignorant of housekeeping, both very young married, and no parents to direct us in it. My wife has told me that such a servant was a blessing to us, whose industry was an example to the other servants. As a reward for her diligence, care, and integrity, I will let you that farm, which my honest old tenant seems to be removing from in a very little time, at the same rent and on the same conditions that his predecessors had it. Now, added he, I think it would not be amiss for my wife and me to withdraw, and leave you to your further determinations, as this seems to be your first interview. We will not interrupt them any longer in their private conversation. My dear lady, taking me by the hand, she thanked me for the good I had done the widow's daughter, in releasing her from slavery, and turning to my lover, said, she will reward all the pains you have taken for her, and will be a daily blessing. And they immediately, as the word was spoke, left the room. He fell down on his knees at my feet. How unworthy am I of this blessing? Can all this be true, or is it a dream? Got hold of my hand and kissed it. I bid him, on pain of my displeasure, rise from his knees, and consider to whom such adoration was due. He did, and said, You have the power to command me to do what you please. Then said I, Let me hear no more of these encomiums, lest I suspect your sincerity, for I have resolved not to let my affection have rule over my reason. Neither have I the vanity to believe myself worthy of that reward, which both my master and lady have so bountifully made mention of. For what I have done, but discharged my duty in the same manner every servant ought to do, without any private mercenary views or interest. When I acted 3 years in the capacity of cook and housekeeper, my perquisites supplied me with clothes. Then advanced a housekeeper and lady's maid, who gave me more clothes than I could wear, besides my other perquisites, which were considerable. For as their generous souls, when they visited their friends or neighbors, rewarded the trouble they gave servants, so it was returned to us, and if I had been thrifty, might have saved money, besides my wages. A further benefit entrusted to me was a great and good example of their private charity, which I daily distributed, either to support credit or hunger. These are Christian benefits, to show me the right road to heaven. After all, I must receive a farm by my master, which the tenants that possessed it for so long a term of years was enabled to live as reputably as any of their neighboring freeholders, and in the liberality of my mistress's bounties, which I am unworthy of, as I cannot expect to make any return. I acknowledge, answered he, that great souls are unwilling to receive more favor than they are able to return. Yet a misfortune that happened to a poor Italian, which perhaps may enable me to ease some part of the hardships you are laboring under. My father being sent for to receive a sum of money from a gentleman of fortune, who had employed him in a building, this gentleman's lady called my father to give his opinion of a spinet, which this Italian had made, and bringing it over to England, in order to sell it for a good sum, the ship was drove by stress of weather on rocks, and dashed to pieces. The man being prepared for the shock, having his instruments secured in a fur-deal case, close sealed, that the salt water could not get entrance, and well corded, so fixing another cord, which he tied round his waist, swam to shore with this spinet, having the advantage of the wind and tide. So the lady told him, as he was a mechanic, that employed so many workmen in various arts of handicraft, she desired his opinion of that spinnet. I have bid £30, and the man will take no less than £50 for it. He, on examination, found it to be worth a great deal more money than the man had offered it for. Said, Madam, it is a great pennyworth at £50. The Italian said that it was great necessity obliged him to offer it for that, as it was worth £80, but having no money to support him in a strange place, was the reason of his offering it at so low a price. But the lady, flying into a violent rage against my father, said that she would have got it for the money that she bid for it, if he had not been. And added she, Will you give £50 for it? He answered he would. Then said she, You shall have it. A pretty scoundrel indeed, that can afford a greater price than I can. Madam, answered he, this is the most curious piece of workmanship my eyes ever beheld, so beautifully embellished both within and without, besides the skill in setting the strings, that sound so melodiously as ravishes the ear. In short, madam, I think it such a masterpiece of beauty and art, that I would be an unjust scoundrel, had I not done it the justice it well deserves. She answered that she believed and conjectured that it was a contrivance between them, to impose on her, and said, as she had found out their knavery, they should not trick her out of her money. So he said, Madam, as it is the first time I was ever taken for a sharper, I will pay for the trick, and be the sufferer myself, not you, madam, and paid the distressed Italian £50, and said, I never bought such a bargain. This enraged her to scurrilous language, as rogue, villain, pickpocket, cheat, etc. The gentleman came in the midst of her fury, and demanded the reason. What violence, added he, have you offered to my wife, that occasions this outrage? My father told him. Oh, madam, answered he, you want this beautiful piece of music for nothing. I steadfastly believe that these narrow souls, that would take so much advantage on a person in distress, they would rob him altogether of the whole, if there were not punishments for such crimes. I would have given him £10 more for it, if she had behaved like a gentlewoman. But as she has not, I would burn it in the fire to ashes, rather than she should have it. So he desired her to withdraw into her closet, and solicit pardon for her calumniating tongue. And I will endeavour to solicit this injured gentleman, that I dare to say never received such reproach before. Sir, answered she, I suppose every pitiful mechanic must be greater in your esteem than I am. If you behave in this manner, it will be so, madam, said he. Taking her by the hand, to lead her out of the room, she gave my father such a buffet with her double fist, that she burst his mouth. The gentleman, more angry, turned her out of the room, and closed the door after her, ordered water to be brought for my father to wash the blood off his face. He gave the Italian 5 guineas, and begged my father's pardon for his wife's behaviour. My father begged his, for being the innocent author of all the disturbance, and said, It is only the lady's passion. I hope she will harbour a more favourable opinion of me, after her passion is abated. So taking his leave of the worthy gentleman, who he saw very much afflicted with the ill behaviour of his wife, the Italian hired a horse for himself, and another man and horse to carry the spinnet, came home with my father, and is with him now, nor does intend to leave him. Now, as I have some hope that you will be mine, I hope your lady will do me the honour to accept of this spinnet, for this worthy father of mine has given it to me. So answered I, You durst not venture this present to my lady, till you were secured of me. Yes, said he, if it was 10 times the value, but then it would not be from you, before you be mine. Sir, answered I, your wisdom exceeds mine, so does your generosity, nor will I refuse you my hand any longer than prudence will direct, in departing from this worthy lady and master, whose goodness, he said, would not keep him much longer in suspense, and kissed my hand again. instead. We'll see. I bid him look what o'clock it was. Surprised, he said it was half an hour past 11, and he thought he had not been half an hour with me. I said, your watch must be wrong, for my mistress's bell rings at half an hour past 10. I inquired for the chambermaid, and she told me that she had put her to bed, and had her orders to make a bed for the gentleman that dined there. I returned, and told him that I was afraid of being displaced. The chambermaid had waited on my lady. Great blessings attend her, answered he, for it was parting with my soul when you went out of the room. But I told him that we were very orderly in sleeping and rising in the morning. We have no suppers for master or lady, except there be company. The servants has cold meat, milk, or beer. If no strangers, the whole family is in their bed by 11, and all rises before 6 in the morning. I hope, answered he, you will balk sleep 1 hour, and oblige me with what is become of the carpenter's wife. I said that I had not delivered my lady the commission her mother had given me of her return to her duty, and likewise the reformation that the daughter made of her mother. For she told me that as soon as she lighted from her horse, entered the house, and beheld her mother, she fainted, and lay within 1 minute of an hour, although all means seemed to no effect of bringing her to life. But the hind's wife, having 2 leeches, set one on each hand, which after biting she recovered life, to the great joy of her mother, and all the family of the servants. Her mother, taking her by the hand, said, Is this my daughter who was lost, and is found again? She was dead, and is alive, and has forgot all her sorrow, as she has received her child. Oh, my dear mother, answered she, can you forgive ingratitude of this nature? And fainted again. So they laid her into bed, and as soon as she came out of the second, gave her some hartshorn drops in water, and she drinking some of it and got asleep. After which she became so much refreshed that she got up and said, I hope I shall not make another elopement from my blessings. Her mother charged her not to mention what was past, but to think of her future state. O dear and best of mothers, said she, lay up no more treasure on earth, where moth, rust, thieves, etc., break through and steal, but lay treasure up as our worthy landlord does in heaven, where you will not be robbed of it. What numbers that heavenly pair relieves is wonderful. The daily prayers the poor makes reach heaven, and although you are not so able as to do so much charity, yet according to your ability, no more is required. You need not fear me deceiving you again, for I have got a full trial of mankind, and surely the man will never see me more, that has used me so cruelly, who, although we were married, he had made such vows to another, as no marriage could dissolve. He said he did not love me, married me for nothing but my fortune, which his cursed mother persuaded him to. He cursed her to her face, turned her out of the cottage, and she has not been heard of since. But, added she, I might have been as miserable in another match, for I think myself no longer his wife, that has made vows to another. She bore a son, which is above 5 years old, and the father never saw him, nor her since he cut her head. Her mother cannot persuade her to wear a silk gown, lace, ribbons, yet says that she is more beautiful than ever. She begged of her mother to get some directions from me of salves and physic, that she might do her poor neighbours good. They say her son is the picture of his mother. As I had her leave, I have told part of the story, but thought it too long to conclude. So if you will go to rest, you may rise in the morning, and ride with me to visit the sick. He said he was not sleepy, but as it was my request, he obeyed it. The chambermaid showed him his bed. I arose the next morning at my usual hour, but my lover being up before me, had my saddle fixed on my little pad, and his own horse being ready, we rode away, all the servants being entire strangers to the affair, except the cook. He gave charity to every one of my patients, but did it so secretly that I did not know till the next day, when they all told me, and prayed for him. When we got home, who should salute my hero but the priest, that came to let my master know that his old tenant was dead. I went to dress my mistress, and told them of the death of the tenant. Then said my mistress, the last honest man of a worthy family is gone, and said likewise that she would advise me to marry that ingenious young man directly, and enter on the farm. Come, I'll plead for the young man, that you have tortured so long for the crime of others. I told them that what they desired in that respect I with pleasure complied to. So my master went to speak to the parson, and I told my mistress the remainder of the widow's story, likewise the little battle of the spinet, which he had reserved to present to her, and the remark that he made. She said, if I should hasten your wedding, you will say that I want the spinet, for there is nothing that I should covet so much as a curiosity of that kind. She went to breakfast, and my master told her that they had been perusing his tenant's will, who had made him his sole executor, having no relation. He said that he would bury him as a relation, for as he was the remains of two honest worthy servants, which are more valuable by much than some relations. I therefore will show the respect due to such in his interment, for my mother's family vault is in that church, and he shall be buried in it. All my tenants shall have scarves, hatbands, and gloves, and likewise all the credible men in the neighborhood. He gave the minister orders for an account to be taken of every poor family in the parish, sent for his steward to make out a list of all his tenants, with orders for silk, gloves, hatbands, and clothes for the deceased's servants. My master and lady went into mourning 6 weeks for him. They distributed 200 pounds amongst the poor householders in the parish. The coffin was ordered to be covered with black, which my hero had the direction of. After the minister and he had got their instructions, they immediately set about getting all things in order. The cook had orders to prepare a cold table for the whole company. We, having killed a beef, sent 2 large roasting pieces, the farmer having left plenty of hams, turkeys, ducks, chickens, butter, flour, cheeses, etc. The 3rd day the corpse was to be buried. I went with the silk, gloves, and hatbands. After all was over, my master ordered the steward to pay off all the servants' legacies, and gave me orders not to leave the house till the steward came away. Opening the place where the money and securities lay, we found 550 pounds, 3,000 pounds on lands, and 500 pounds in bonds. The steward says there is corn and cattle that will raise a fine sum of money. He paid the servants their wages and legacies. Is there no mention of his wearing apparel in his will? Said the steward. Yet you, to the servants, need not fear getting it, or part, for I will inform my master of it. They came and told the steward one wanted to speak to him. When he returned, he said to me, we are invited to sup with a relation of mine in this neighborhood, who has sent a single horse chair for us. I hope you will go with me. With all my heart, answered I. The people are strangers to me here. So putting on my riding habit, got into the chair, and he drove me to the house, which I suspected, although I did not let him know the least tittle of what happened. My lover handed me out of the chair with as noble an air and as polite as any baronet, conducted me into the room, and presented me to his father, who saluted me with a modest grace, and said, Thrice welcome to my house, thou glory of thy sex. What, says the steward, has her fame reached so far as here? Ask your cousin how long it is since her virtues shined here. Ask me no questions in that respect, for there is an embargo on my tongue. Therefore excuse me speaking on that subject of fame. But, turning to his father, if you will let the Italian give us a tune on the spinet, till supper be ready, for I believe that this will be the last night you will have it. He answered that it was his own, he might dispose of it as he pleased. and added that all sorrow was departed at the approach of this worthy woman, and therefore entertain her as agreeably as you possibly can. If you like music, madam, I will join with you. I thanked him, and said that the spinet was all the music my lady admired, and that she had taught me to join in concert, and was mistress of many lessons of Italian time, of which I could do a small matter, although scarce worth your hearing. My lover had the man and spinet in a moment in the room, and as soon as it was uncovered I was struck with admiration at the beauty of it, and said, "This instrument pleases the eye so much that it cannot offend the ear." The artist made me a bow, and thanked me for my approbation on the masterpiece of his art, adding that I was the second lady that had seen it in England. I, seeing no more women but the maid and myself, said, "I hold a wager that the next lady that sees it will be the best of the three. As we have seen it, let us hear it." He begun a lesson, and he and me joined the instrument with vocal music, which they all said was well done. Supper being ready, we sat down, and after supper the old gentleman asked if I would choose another tune, but I said, "I have been held a little busy this day, and besides you have heard my best." "Nay," said he, "we don't much admire your Italian. A good hornpipe or volunteer we could form a better judgment on." I answered I might thank my dear lady for the small matter that I knew of music. "A worthy teacher," answered he. "Their tenants live better than some landlords, and this worthy old neighbor of ours, that is now laid in the dust, did more good out of his farm than some of our neighboring squires does out of their great fortunes." "Indeed," answered the steward, "I think every tenant covets to be under him, for there has been 40 about this farm, that bids me but ask what rent I would have, but I told them that I must consult my master first." One wiser than the rest said he would go to the fountainhead, and abruptly asked my master what rent he would take for the farm his tenant had left. My master told him that it was disposed of. He seemed not to be satisfied with the answer, and said if he had let it to the best bidder, he might have got double the rent. "That may be, friend, but will not a tenant have a better bargain at the same rent?" "Certainly," answered the other. "But if the farm be disposed of," said the steward, "it is to the priest or your son, for there has not been a soul with the squire since the old man died, but these two, so I am apt to think the one of them will get it." My lover and I both blushed. "What," says the steward, "do you both blush? You have had a very expeditious courtship, or a very cunning one, for I heard my master bid the priest come to his house, and bring a license to marry a couple." "You are jesting," said I. "I am not, upon my word," answered he. "The old gentleman said to the steward, 'You call this a sudden wedding, but my son will not call it such. This fair one put 7 years' trial of his skill to gain her, which set forth his wisdom. As for cunning, he is above it.' The news," answered the steward, "is as welcome to me as you. I am proud of the thoughts of this unkind wished-for relation that has kept me a stranger to what would have given me and mine much pleasure to have known, for it was my opinion she would not marry any man. I thought she had been a man-hater, for she was so often complaining of bad husbands, yet it seems you have found out the way to her heart." I begged his silence. "I have done," answered he. "My cousin and me will be bedfellows tonight. Perhaps he may have a strange one tomorrow night, but I will name no one." "Nay," said I, "stewards may say what they please to tenants, lest, if the rent be not ready, they drive their cattle. But," turning to the old gentleman, "sir, I am very sure it is past your time for rest. The clock has struck 10. He answered that 8 was his time since his indisposition. So saluting me, bid me good night. His son handed him to his room, who presently came back. The steward said, "Come, let us be no longer upon the banter. Keep me no longer in the mist. But be frank, as it will not be in your power to keep it much longer." He said, "Get leave of my darling." I answered, "You have my leave to inform your cousin of what he seems desirous to know." So beginning with the courtship, concluded with my master's offering him the farm. In truth, said the steward, cousin, if you have had a hard courtship, you seem to make a very happy conclusion in the prospect of a good wife and a good farm. He told him that he intended to make a present of the spinnet to my mistress. So you may, answered he, if it was worth 100 pounds yet. In my opinion, nothing under the sun would fit her taste more. Therefore let it be packed up in the morning, send this Italian to my house with it, and after the grace is said, present my lady with it. Well, answered I, now you seem to have transacted what is to be done. I therefore will be obliged to the maid, if she will show me where I am to sleep, which she did. I rose the next morning at my usual hour, and after I was dressed, went into the parlour, where was the steward and his cousin. The steward said, this man is as much afraid of approaching you as if you were a duchess. He stands in greater awe than ever a lover did on the wedding day. As he is so very humble a servant, answered I, it is to be hoped he will not be a proud master. No, answered he, I rather choose to be all obedience, love, and duty, telling me that he had sent the spinnet and the artist with it, and that the priest were to breakfast with us at the farmer's house. Leaving my compliments to the old gentleman, the chair being ready, the steward drove me to the farmhouse, where the priest was waiting, who handed me out and welcomed me home again. Sir, I thank you, answered I, but must soon quit this home and return. Now, says the steward, was not I right? Come, no more banters before breakfast, said I. Seeing the house in very good order, I said to the maid, wilt thou like being a servant to my lady? Very well, answered she. So I hired her to serve the cook. As soon as breakfast was done, we set forward on our journey. My lover came up to us in a new suit. Said the priest to the steward, is such a whisper that I heard, is this the bridegroom? It is very likely, said the other. Then said the priest, I am sure of getting as good a neighbor as I have lost. So the merry priest was all mirth, which made the journey seem shorter. As the clock struck 11, we arrived. My lady came to me, welcomed me, and bid me come upstairs, for she had something of importance to say to me. When I came into the dressing-room, there was a new silk gown, a pair of her stays, shoes, stockings, and every particular. Now, said she, I will send the chambermaid to help you to dress, and pray be expeditious, for you must not exceed the canonical hour. She went down into the room to my master, the priest, and my lover, and said to him, young man, you are going to receive the hand of this woman, whose price far exceeds rubies, and as you have been a dutiful servant to your adopted father, I hope you will be an affectionate husband to her. It is not the interest of any family to part with such a faithful servant. Yet they must be mercenary that would desire to deprive the world of such a pattern, as I am well assured she will be. He paid her reverence, and said he was unworthy of so fine a woman, but what he fell short of her merit, hoped to make up with diligence and affection. She answered that she verily believed it. The priest added that no young man had so general a good character in his parish. And, says my master, I think him a worthy fellow, and you will find her as good a neighbour, and as constant a communicant as any in your flock. But, sir, in examining the will of the deceased, I find he hath left you a legacy of 100 pounds, and mentions that as your salary was slender, it was in my power to advance that sum, which to me seemed as if he repented he had not bequeathed you more. Pray, sir, inform me what salary does the rector give you? 40 pounds a year, answered the priest. And no church fees? Said my master. None at all, sir, answered the priest. All the fees goes into the rector's pocket. How can you, sir, maintain your large family, a wife, 5 daughters, and a servant out of that? I keep no servant, answered he. My wife obliges her daughters to industry by her example, otherwise it would not do. Indeed, when our children were young, my wife could not do without a servant. But no sooner could the eldest keep the youngest, but she dismissed her servant, and performed the office of a servant-maid herself, finding my circumstances obliged her thereto, or otherwise run behindhand in the world. I think, answered my master, that I have heard that the rector did no duty, except one sermon a year. Is it true? Very true, sir, answered he. Then, said my master, as you have the full charge of the flock, the sick to visit, the dead to bury, and the living to admonish, your rector ought to give you better share of the revenue. For better is he that is scorned, and has a servant, than he that is honored, and has none. Is not the laborer worthy of his hire? You are obliged to keep a horse out of this small salary, and when you are called out of your bed to baptize a weak child, or administer the sacrament, pray, sir, who gets you your horse ready? Sir, said he, I having often midnight duty to do, and the parish being large, whenever I am called upon that duty, so good a wife have I, that she has my horse ready saddled for me, whilst I am dressing myself. My master said, I think it so great a hardship that a minister of the gospel should be so straitened in his circumstances, as not to be enabled to keep a servant, that I think myself bound in duty to support that want, by paying you the legacy, and adding £50 to each of your daughters and wife, which will amount to £300 more, the interest of which money will enable you to keep a servant, and make a small provision for your 5 daughters. The priest, amazed at the bounty of his great benefactor, made a reverent bow, and begun a speech of thankfulness and gratitude, but was forbid to proceed by that worthy gentleman, who told him he knew he was going to pay him more homage than he wanted to receive, and you will oblige me more if you will give this young man a matrimonial lecture that is going to enter into a conjugal state. In the interim my lady came up and told me what had passed, adding how much she was grieved to hear a minister of God assert that he had no more to maintain his family but £40 a year, which was not sufficient for food, exclusive of raiment, but your worthy master will ease that yoke. Pray let me examine your dress. Indeed, Mrs. Bride, I think you have completed the Quaker. Don't you think it grand for a carpenter's bride? Answered I, madam. Although a mechanic, says she, he has the accomplishments of a gentleman. But here he comes with your master and the priest, who said the time is run out to the last quarter of an hour. Well, answered my master, the bride and her maid, pointing to my mistress, are ready, and the chapel door is open, so let us enter. He took me by the hand, led me into the chapel, attended by my mistress, priest, and bridegroom, and the grace was quickly dispatched. When we entered the dining-room, the Italian and the spinet were there, which my dear lady, observing, said, Here is a most beautiful instrument. Indeed, so it is, answered my master. Says the priest, I never beheld so great a curiosity. Who is the owner of this masterpiece of art? Said my mistress. I, madam, answered the bridegroom, and hopes that your goodness will accept of this small mite in token and acknowledgment of tenfold value received. If it sounds as well as it looks, I will thankfully accept it. The artist gave an Italian lesson that my lady said was as great a ravisher of her ear as it was to her eye, said it was a present too great to accept, but I told her that there was a reward already received. After dinner my lady had provided gloves for all my fellow servants, who were surprised, never hearing of nor suspecting a lover. Then my lady bid the new housekeeper come in, who was weeping, and said, What happiness such a precedent gave the family. She deserves everything that thou hast said, answered my lady. So does thy grateful acknowledgments deserve everything that she has done in improving thy knowledge. She therefore delivers up all her trust to thee, in whom I place the same confidence I did in her. Therefore, as she has done by you, do you by others. So dry up all your tears, for I rejoice that she will make a good wife to a worthy man that was dying for her. I hope she will produce some copies of herself, and that it advances you to her station. your sister to yours, and as she has hired one in your sister's place, I hope you will take the same pains to instruct her, as has been taken with you, by which means her order will be continued in my house. I would be very unhappy to see such confusion, and have the same reason of complaints of bad servants that others have. Neither have I a constitution to bustle and brawl with such. So as I gave her, I give you a guinea. Her wages and perquisites you may likewise expect. The indulgence she had, if you deserve it, as I hope you will. Then I delivered to her the separate notes of all my charge of sets of table and tea china, of all glasses, salvers, and every separate item belonging to desserts, of all the stock of sweetmeats, wet and dry, pickles, hams, tongues, and bacon stitches. Of the bed and table linen. There is my book of daily provision, containing ducks, geese, turkeys, chickens, pullets, capons, beef, mutton, lamb, and veal. So is there the book of consumption, which gives an account of every individual fowl that was bought, and when it was dressed for the family use, as well as every separate boiling, roasting, stewing, or baking piece of beef. Likewise every joint of mutton, lamb, or veal, for these 9 years past, which the notes the steward has filed in his office confirm the truth of. So can I justify the justice of this servant, meaning the new housekeeper, that has not impaired you of one single fowl or chicken by neglect or injustice these 7 years, which is more than I can say for myself. For besides the loss of so much poultry fed into diseases by my ignorance, the impairing of your health was a far greater crime, as you had such sent to your table, which I am very well assured destroyed your health. But as soon as I was directed the right way, I never left it, nor has she ever had a sick or distempered fowl since that time. I, seeing her care, industry, and capacity, desired the schoolmaster to teach her writing and bookkeeping, which she readily obtained, and has for these 2 years past been as busy in acting the housekeeper as the cook. Although she did not believe me, never seeing a man in my company, I told her that one day was to rise a step higher. I told her that she one day was to rise a step higher. I let her into my method, by which she can act in the manner I have before related, having nothing more but the most material part, that is, all your wearing apparel, linen, and jewels, so giving her the lift of them, my lady desired to see it, and after she had looked it over, would return it her again. My mistress bid me go with her into her room, where she opened her escritoire, and taking out the note of her wearing apparel, said, "Behold the marks there made at the separate articles, which I have put into a box, which is nailed and close corded down, lest you should make a distribution before you leave the house. Therefore make another list." Oh, it's a lift, not list. Oh, my God. So giving her the list of them, my lady desired to see it, and after she had looked it over, would return it her again. My mistress bid me go with her into her room, where she opened her escritoire, and taking out the note of her wearing apparel, said, "Behold the marks there made at the separate articles, which I have put into a box, which is nailed and close corded down, lest you should make a distribution before you leave the house. Therefore make another list, and leave out all that you see the mark set on. And in the meantime I will go and get another lesson on the spinnet, which charms me very much." She accordingly did, and just as I had finished the copy, she came into the room and said, "You have finished it." "Yes, madam," said I, "and wonders what I must do with such stocks of apparel as you have packed up for me, as I intend to wear very little but homespun gowns in the country. If you won't wear them, keep them for your daughters. Tell them they were the reward of virtuous industry, and the best deserving shall have most of them. This will spur up your daughter's industry, for fine clothes are a great temptation to young creatures. You smile at me, added she, but I have made your master, priest, bridegroom, and Italian laugh at your books of provision and consumption, and your master declares he will have all your 9 years' notes compared with the provision book, to see how they agree the one with the other. The steward was ordered to pay the bridegroom 100 pounds for his bride's 10 years' service, and 21 pounds for the interest. The bridegroom said that he would receive none of it, as he was indebted double the sum. My master said, "You shall have it 7 years without interest, in which time I don't at all dispute, but by your own industry, and the assistance of a good helpmate, will enable you to pay it with ease and pleasure at the expiration of that time. As you had no hopes 10 days since of this marriage, I conjecture that you have not given proper notice to those who have your money upon interest to pay it in." He answered, having no need of it, did not call it out of the hands it was in. Yet I think 6 months' notice is what is common in such cases, as it being near Martinmas, I intend giving, and it being near Martinmas, I intend giving warning to pay it against May. "But that will not answer your present demand," said my master, "for your father designs to put you in possession of his trade and business, to give up house and board himself and his 3 sons with you, he finding himself unable to undergo his former fatigue. Resolves to pass the remainder of his days in peace. Then will you have his stock of timber, that he employed his neighbouring journeymen to work in the winter quarter, when he could not build. He kept them employed in making household furniture. This was an act of humanity to those poor men that have families, which I hope will give you the same pleasure it has done your honest predecessor. Besides, as you have so great an artist as this gentleman," pointing to the Italian, "that is so well pleased with your family, he, no doubt, will instruct you in his curiosity, which may be of advantage to you, so that if you want 200 or 300 pounds more, you may have it." My deceased tenant left me this money in trust, which trust I intend to discharge in honor of his memory. It is my firm belief he intended this fortune for a sacred use, by the hint he gave me of your legacy, sir, directing himself to the priest, which he, repenting was so small, told me that I had it in my power to add to it, which in effect was to say, if I have not left this fortune to the righteous heirs, I will choose one in whom I can confide in doing justice. I intend to apply it in the following manner. 1,000 pounds of this money shall be a bank stock. 1,000 pounds of this money shall be a bank stock for any farmer in that parish that appears to want 50 pounds, and ask it as a charity, to help him to a stock, or otherwise by cultivation to improve his farm, the above sum paying no interest for 7 years, such farmer finding security to pay it at the expiration of that time. The remainder of my tenant's money I intend to apply in building a free school on a piece of ground I have very near the church, and fix 2 masters, the head one to have 40 pounds per annum, and the usher 10 pounds, who shall teach all the children of the parish, whose parents or friends apply for this benefit as a charity. And as soon as the weather becomes seasonable for building, a plan shall be drawn for a school and dwelling-house for 2 masters, the head master to have 8 rooms, and the usher 4. The priest answered, if the masters are elected, I will stand candidate. My master said that the instructing of youth was, in his opinion, full as sacred as the pulpit. Yet, added he, I don't think there is one priest in 100 that can subject himself to consult the tempers and capacities of children. I am that one, answered the priest, who have a specimen to indicate that I have consulted the different capacities of boys and girls, who differ as much in minds as faces. I have taught my 5 daughters to read, and 4 of them to write. 2 sons of my clerks I have instructed to read, write, and understand accounts, vulgar and decimal, and one I have taught both the Latin and Greek authors, and something of the Hebrew language. I was obliged to have recourse to different methods with every one of them, in communicating the authors and my thoughts to them. But the eldest delights me in his quick progress, for he takes in learning as fast as I can give it him. How old is the youth? Said my master. 16, sir, answered the priest. My master said, You shall be head, and if you judge the youth qualified for your usher, you shall have it in your power to put him into that post, as it will be a year before the building is finished, and fit for a family to dwell in, during which time I recommend to you all possible diligence in completing the boy for his undertaking. This worthy gentleman performed all these charities. My husband's diligence and pains was such as enabled him to support his family with every necessary of life, to make all about him happy. Nay, were the night a month long, I could entertain you with this worthy man's humanity and charity, who built a little house, with 4 beds in it, for any of the poor, that were afflicted with wounds or sickness, which he said his wife would cure, for he was sure that a blessing attended all her endeavors. He sent home a hogshead of Jamaica sugar. I wondered at so large a quantity of brown sugar, and asked him what I must do with it. He answered, Make wine of it. I answered that I never made wine of coarse sugar, but will try if this will answer the same end. He said that his reason told him that it would, for, added he, all the double refined sugars is made from this dross, and the juice of your fruit will refine it, as well as the sugar boilers will do it with the combustibles. I answered, My dear, you must be right, and pray tell me what is the expense of this quantity. He answered that there was a ton weight of it, that he got for 18 pounds. Well, answered I, then if that be the case, it will not be 2 pence a pound, which will make a very great difference from 10 pence. For I never made any wines of sugar under that price, and as we have a very great quantity of fruit this season, the deceased bachelor took great delight in planting all manner of fruit trees. The cherries being all full ripe, I set to work, and got them pulled. After all the stalks were taken from them, I had 25 gallons of bruised fruit to a pulp, unto which I put the same quantity of water, and let it stand 24 hours, stirring it well every 4 hours. Then I made 3 strainers of coarse thin linen cloth, and strained all the liquor through these cloths. After I had squeezed the juice out, I put the squeezed fruit into the cloths, as we put the cheese into the press. Wash the cheese press clean. I put in the squeezed cherries, to press all the juice and pulp clean out of them, setting a tub to receive what drained from it. I then put all the juice together, and measured it, of which there was 42 gallons, to which I put 16 stone of this sugar, and stirring it well, let it stand 24 hours, stirring it well every 3 hours. I having a wine hogshead ready, in which there had been Florence wine, I tunned it into it, and had 10 gallons more than it held. I let it have room to foment out of at a spill hole, and as soon as it was done working, closed it up. I then summoned up all my reason of wine-making, in order to make as much wine of my fruit as possible, as I had such a large quantity of sugar, which I determined to make the greatest advantage of, as it was the will and pleasure of my worthy husband, which duty and love obliged me to obey. I got my wine currants pulled, bruised, and ordered in the same manner I did my cherries, and having 12 gallons of bruised berries, I added 12 gallons of water, which after straining and pressing had 22 gallons of liquor, to which I put 8 stone of sugar, and 2 pounds of dried elderflowers, after it had wrought 24 hours in this liquor, stirring it well every 3 hours. I strained it through a hair sieve, squeezing out all the flowers, and tunned it into a wine half hogshead, and had as much over as filled an 8-gallon cask. all which I let foment as above, and then closed them up. The red and black currants, when gathered and bruised, had the same quantity of juice, to which I put the same quantity of sugar, and had the like quantity of wine. Of yellow and crystal gooseberries mixed, I had 35 gallons of bruised fruit, adding the same quantity of water, and pressed out the juice, to which I put 24 stone of sugar. I let it stand as before mentioned, and then tunned up a hogshead. I had 30 gallons more, to which I added 30 pounds of sugar, and let it stand 24 hours, and tunned up a half hogshead of this, and had other 4 gallons of it left. My red gooseberries, when bruised, were 12 gallons, to which I added the same of water. After straining and pressing them, I had 21 gallons of liquor, to which I added 8 stone of sugar. I tunned up a half hogshead, and had 8 gallons more, which I casked up. I had the same quantity of green gooseberries, of which I made the like of wine, in the above manner. When I summoned up my stock of wine, I had 2 full hogsheads, 5 half hogsheads, and 46 gallons in small casks, which had consumed 1/2 and 30 pounds of my ton of sugar. The quantity of sugar that remained I grudged to keep by me, as I thought it would do more service in the wine order, so that as soon as the brambles were full ripe, I set as many poor children to gather, as filled me an open-headed hogshead full, which when bruised and divided into 2 casks, I added the same quantity of water that I had of bruised fruit. Our garden being hedged round with large quicks, which bore sloes, near the size of damsons, which being ripe, we gathered a bushel of them, and bruised them. I added sugar, as reason told me that it would give a rough taste to the wine. After it had stood the above time, I strained and pressed the fruit, and measuring my liquor, had 84 gallons, to which I put 32 stone of sugar, which I let stand the usual time, and then tunned it into a wine butt, and had 10 gallons more. After all my wines were done fomenting, I secured all their spill holes, and closed them all. As soon as winter approached, I closed up all the cellar windows, and put a great quantity of horse dung before them, so that my wine cellar in the middle of winter was warmer than any room in the house. At Christmas I said to my husband, "My dear, you never inquire of me how my wines prove, nor what quantity I have made." He answered, "My life, the reason of that is, because you need not any supervisor." "But you," answered I, "therefore go with me into the cellar, and let us try these wines." I took 7 clean wine glasses. He said, "What have you so many sorts of wines?" "You will see I have," answered I. But when he entered the cellar, he was struck with wonder at the number of casks, which were 1 pipe, 2 hogsheads, 5 half hogsheads, and 7 small casks, every cask having the name of the wine, and the day of the month when it was tunned writ upon paper, and pasted upon each end of them. He spilled all the small casks, which were transparently fine. So he took the 7 glasses full of wine, and showed to the Italian, who said that after that wine got age, it would not be inferior to foreign wines, for this wine made of green gooseberries is tinctured with champagne, and if it had 3 years of age, it would be more near the relish. That of the brambles will be very near red port. It has the color and rough taste, and it will be a very strong wine, for it has a body that will keep 20 years. Your white currant wine has the flavor of Frontignac. The cherry wine seems to taste of French wine. Your gooseberry wine, sweet mountain. The red gooseberry wine is flavored like Burgundy. Your red currant wine is a very pretty tasted one. Give it age, and you will have a great credit by it. My husband said to him, "Sir, go with me into the wine cellar, and see the quantity of wine she has made, likewise the care taken to keep it warm." which they both gave such praise to, as soothed my vanity. My husband said that he could, by the virtue of a good wife, drink wine cheaper than his neighbours could small beer. But, said I, pray, sir, what neighbour have you that would give his wife a ton of sugar to make wine of? It is your great care and industry that enables your wife to furnish your cellar with wine, as well as your table with meat. In short, his great wisdom, generosity, and example justly entitled him to the esteem of all that knows him. As I have the pleasure to be alone with you, tell me as frankly of your matrimonial state as I have of mine. I answered that if I had laid up as much treasure in heaven as she, before I entered into that state, I, no doubt, might have received the reward that she had done, and as I thought myself remiss in my duty, perhaps I got as good a husband as I deserved. You know I told you before there is many better, many worse. Your story has ravished my ears, but as there is not the same harmony in mine, you shall not have the pain of hearing that part of my indulgent husband, whose affection, industry, and care may appear if I write out my history, which may have as many points of admiration in the recital of my 24 years' hard travelling in one county, wherein divers cruelties were committed by the power of some justices, whose fortunes entitles them to get a commission of the peace, for there is no inquiry after morals, integrity, or wisdom. I suffered a 10 years' persecution by the tyranny of one of those miscreant heroes that laboured very hard to rob me of the profit of my lawful endeavours. 3 years he laboured against my character without success. I petitioned heaven to witness my innocence, and he that does turn the hearts of men as seems best with his infinite goodness and wisdom, seemed to interfere in my cause, which was as follow. This tyrant, by the suggestion of a cunning aunt, laid a snare for my character, and when a very proper opportunity offered, having an assize trial, called my husband to him, and said, the judge bid me tell you to provide for him and the family, for he will be at your house, besides the chancellor and many of the council, and with all seeming respect bid him make free of his cellars, for French wine or anything in his house to do him service. My husband, with all the respect due to so much humility and good neighbourhood, thanked his worship, and came home and told me. I answered that I hoped he would be a better neighbour than his aunt, that lived next door to me 9 years, and was very often a borrower, but had very little to lend. I have supplied her with fat ducks, chickens, bacon, butter, bread. If I got lean fowls for my fat, I was well off. Bread, butter, or bacon, they were above taking notice to pay. It was the servants that borrowed in the mistress's name, and I am apt to think for her use, as I had part of her entertainments to supply when she had company, she having a great pleasure in entertaining those above her rank and circumstances after she got riches, but hated the sight of all those that were her greatest benefactors in the time of her distress. And if this be real kindness offered to you from her nephew, it is a gratification to me for a service I did him before he was master of this great fortune. When he was a scholar, about 18 years of age, he came from the university to pay a visit to his friends. His aunt's house was his home, I being the next-door neighbour, having a well-accustomed inn. A servant told me that one wanted me in the entry, and when I came there, who was it but this young youth, who very complacently inquired after my health? I thanked him, and welcomed him into the country. He said, I have a horse to sell you. I answered, I have no manner of skill in buying horses. My husband makes these bargains. But this is a wooden horse for drying linen on, said he. I answered, Sir, my husband supplies me in those articles. But said he, this horse is mine, and I want to sell it. I at that instant beheld a blush, and observed a cloud in his brow, frankly said, Pray, sir, tell me the price of this horse. He answered, a crown. So I gave it him, but at the same time said I had not the least occasion for it, but to oblige him. He returned me thanks, and assured me that it was a very good horse, and would send it up by one of his aunt's servants. He sent it me, and to my surprise this horse had scarce a leg to stand upon. My husband in great fury asked me what I had bought that rotten stick for. I answered only for billet wood, and to oblige a youth that must be pinched for pocket money. As his aunt hath long fetches, this seems to me to be one of them, for I never spoke to the young man, nor had the least acquaintance of him. Yet I saw in his countenance that if I expected his future notice, I must buy the horse, as he was designed by his aunt for this great fortune, which you see he hath accomplished, and if there be the least gratitude in him, he will not forget that crown for this rotten stick, which was not worth twopence. However, the Chancellor coming to our house, called for some French wine, and said it was not good. My husband sent to borrow 6 bottles of this great man's wine, telling the Chancellor whose wine he had borrowed for him. But one of the council lodged at this great man's house, who had bid the lawyer make inquiry of his brethren after 6 bottles of wine, which he made a present of to the council. This agent, in the presence of the judges and council, which dined all together at Carlisle, inquired of the Chancellor how he liked the wine that was sent him to the inn from Squire Flash. He said I had no wine but what I paid the landlord for, who told me he borrowed it of him. At which a rumour of infamy was raised by the judges and lawyers, who determined never to come to this inn again. This lawyer writing a letter full of invectives to this antagonist, who took the opportunity at a banquet, after the lady's recovery of a childbearing, when he had a full drawing-room, amongst whom was a worthy gentleman and a great benefactor to this inn of ours, in whose name he sent a servant, desiring my husband to come and speak with him, who had something of consequence to communicate to him. My husband, full of joy, told me the message that he had received, which he verily believed was that these gentlemen were about setting forward horse races, which, added he, will give some relief to the great loss that we have lately received. So full of expectation went to the house of this great man, who, as soon as he had entered his drawing-room, rose up, and having the lawyer's letter to his hand, said, Here, villain, is thy character in black lines. Sure no gentleman of credit will ever frequent the house of a common robber. Villain! I will bring thou to a dry morsel, for robbing me of my wine, for which I shall bring the house unto desolation. Nor did you ever see a man in such distraction as my husband came home to me and said that if he had robbed this hero of 1,000 pounds on the highway, he could not have called him more rogues or villains. Yet, added he, I can call my secret judge to witness that I never wronged the world of 6pence, to my knowledge. For what did he call you such names? Said I. For his 6 bottles of wine, said he, which he denieth that he lent me. He has got a letter from some of the councillors, which he threateneth destruction to my house with, for he swears to show it to every one of my guests, until I be brought to beggary. But did you receive all this calumny in silence? Had you not courage to justify your innocence? He said that the surprise and disappointment struck me into such a heat that I remained dumb for some minutes, my tongue stuck fast to the roof of my mouth, until I heard the voice of my worthy benefactor, who said, Hast thou nothing to speak in thy own justification? If thou art innocent, speak for thyself, but if thou art guilty, I am sorry for thou, and am afraid that thou wilt be ruined. I begun to tell this whole story to this gentleman, but was interrupted by the aunt and lady with rogue and villain for daring to justify myself in their presence, who thought proper to condemn me. But, said I, take a witness with you to the steward, who you told me was with his master that very day the judges left thy house, when you offered him pay for this wine, in the presence of this steward, who, I hope, is more worthy than his master. But if I should be deceived, and he deny your offering to pay him on that day, it will be a very hard task for you to clear your innocence of this aspersion, which that slanderer is so eager to smiting your character with. He took an honest man with him to the stewards, but what an ecstasy of joy did I receive when they told me how far the steward exceeded his master in humanity and justice. For when my husband told him the treatment that he had received, he was very sorry, but said it was lucky that he was present when he came to pay for the wine. That day the judge went from his house, adding that such was his opinion of his honesty. If he had not come on that day, he should have thought him as clear in fact. But added he, how my master could use an honest man in that manner surprises me.